Hey everybody, it's Jim.
This is Ennis.
And we're Inner Solutions, a company dedicated to providing mental health resources for those in need from two guys who suffered for a long time and now feel better. We wanted to talk about, or just have a discussion today about, what does it actually feel like to change? Maybe you're in a situation that's unsustainable. You've been suffering from depression. You've got a high level of anxiety. Or maybe you've just been working dead-end jobs, American Beauty style, and you're just sick and tired of everything that's been going on in your life. Well, we want to start by saying, we know what you mean. We've been there 100%. And we've been through really high anxiety, really high panic attacks. I used to suffer from depression. And I'm happy to say I've had a long sustainable term of none of those. And it's really been through working through this process of change. And we get this question all the time from clients, which is like, well, what do I do? Like, what does it feel like to change? And we realize in a lot of mental health videos or even kind of inspirational videos, they'll say things like, just process through your emotions. Just live your fullest. They'll give you these really vague statements. So we want to kind of break it down and really talk about, what does it feel like in the moment to listen to this inner conflict you may have, or to slow down from kind of the autopilot, automatic behaviors and thought patterns that you have, to start to literally change the shape of your brain by doing this. If you're not familiar with the concept of neuroplasticity, it means that as you change what you do, or as you change the way you think, or even when you slow down just to contemplate, where am I, what am I going to be doing right now, you're literally changing the structure of your brain in the moment. And it's the start of creating that sustainable change that we want to feel like. So, Ennis, is there any behaviors in your life that you've really shifted dramatically that you can remember back to what was the kind of the catalyst to start you into that new change and new integration?
Yeah, there's a lot. I would say the big one that just comes to mind immediately is cigarettes. I used to smoke almost a pack a day for a while there, and quitting was a challenge, and it happened in multiple steps where I would quit, and then I would be good for a bit, and then I would start smoking again, and then it was just a back and forth for a while, where I would just quit and come back and quit and come back, and eventually the length that I stayed away from it would start to lengthen, and the intensity that I would come back at it would decrease, and it went from 10 a day to 5 a day to occasionally having once a month, and then occasionally having once every few months, and to now nicotine is really not an issue for me.
Right. So there's always that moment, because I smoked for a long time too, and there's always that moment where you feel the momentum of wanting to quit, but then there's that kind of pivotal moment where the impulse or the urge comes in. Mm-hmm. And so how do you, let's try to break down that moment and what factors go into changing that exact moment where you're able to say, I'm okay, and fight the impulse.
I think for me, it began with the knowledge and intuition, like I should quit. Long before I did quit, there was this feeling of like, I should make this change. I want to make this change. I need to make this change, And so there was a growing intensity. Mm-hmm. There was a growing intensity of, okay, this needs to happen. And the more aware that I let myself be around the habit, the more that intensity grew. Because if I was out smoking and I just let myself pretend like it wasn't happening, it was almost like this, just like imagine pretending that everything's okay. That intensity didn't have to grow. However, there was a point where I started to just like, as I'm taking the cigarette out of the packaging, as I'm lighting it up, as I'm smoking it, I'm just staying aware of the fact like, I really need to quit this soon. And the more I did that, just that intensity and that desire to change started to increase. And then I don't know if I can remember a specific moment, but at some point there was just like it was a mixture of disgust, a mixture of just wanting to quit and change, and a mixture of just like, I'm done. I can't shouldn't do this. I can't do this anymore. Shouldn't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then I put it down. And then I, didn't pick it up for a while. I did come back to it several times, quit, come back, quit, come back. But again, it was like that determination to stay on course it made me quit again and again and again. And eventually one of those worked.
Yeah, I think some of the key components is like kind of the clarity of, okay, this is something that needs to go, and that initial decision, and getting real clear about why it needs to go, and then creating the space for you to not necessarily put, intensify the pressure, kind of trusting the process. And you were also at a place where you weren't at kind of critical mass, where the behavior is destructive into your body, but it's not the kind of immediate destructive to where it's going to have a big kind of negative result that would reinforce the need for change. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of over time, it sounded like it was a little bit more of making the commitment, more and more being like, okay, I know this has to go. And it kind of just built over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, one of the key components is getting, really understanding that whatever the behavior might be is a symptom of something else. So if you're smoking, or if you're, have impulsive anger, if you have, impulsive eating habits, anything that feels really quick and automatic like that, it's important to slow down and kind of analyze the situation to understand what's going on, because the cigarettes were fulfilling a need for you. The anger is fulfilling a need, or the, working a crappy job, or whatever the behavior is, it's fulfilling a need. And so we want to kind of backsource that to figure out, well, what's happening before that? What's the feeling that you're having that the cigarette is helping with, or that the anger is helping with, or how do you break that down into kind of digestible pieces to understand? So let's say somebody wants to change the behavior if they get extremely angry. They have like just this rage inside that when somebody does, something XYZ to them, their default action now is just to get really angry. And we can have these habits and behaviors for so long that it gets hard to understand them, and they become more and more reinforced in us as we do them. So what you want to do is look at, well, okay, I got angry. What was going on before the anger? Okay, maybe my kids were on top of me. I felt trapped. Okay, well, you feel trapped. So you can go in and do some inner exploration over, well, what is that feeling of being trapped? And you can really look at it. What's my history of being trapped? When do I remember that? And this is a great place to go see a therapist or a coach to help you break this down. What does it feel like for that piece of you that feels trapped? How do you connect with it? And then furthermore, how do you let it know, hey, it's okay to be trapped? And also to let the anger know, like, hey, when we're actually trapped, we're safe. Like, our kids trapping us is not the same as, back in the day when, I was abused, or when something else was going on. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch of pieces around that. But I feel like a big part of it is knowing that the behavior is typically a symptom, and you want to understand the source. And the source is always coming from a deeper emotional place.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting. Once you start to get a lot of awareness of it, where you notice that you're doing this thing, you know that it's not the best action you could be taking, and you start to have an intention to not do it anymore, or if it's a new behavior, to do it more often. And there's these micro decision points.
Yes.
Which is the title of this video, is what it feels like to change. And I feel like everything is happening in these micro decision points where let's say for me, it was driving home, driving past the gas station, and there's like a 3-second decision point. Do I pull over to get the cigarette?
3 seconds is long. Usually it's like a millisecond.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm just going. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But in that moment, there's like this battle of like, well, what you just said is interesting. I think when you're first starting it, it's automatic.
Totally.
Where
It feels automatic. It's microseconds. Yeah.
And then as you become more and more aware of it, you almost notice the battle of like, there's one part
Exactly.
that's like, let's not do it. The other part like, yeah, do it. And, they might not even be using words. It might just be these like unconscious impressions that are battling out.
These physical urges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in those 3 seconds, I remember thinking, nah,
Yeah, no, that's the right noise. Nah, it's like a frustration, because the real answer to the title of the video is uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable.
It's fighting a bit of an urge. There's a part of you that wants this thing that you've been doing, that's been working, fulfilling that need. But there's this other part of you that's probably a little more evolved, a little more intentional, that's saying it's bad for us. And so And so at that moment, and I love that. So first, by doing the kind of analysis, excuse me, of the situation, you're getting closer and closer to getting in touch with that part that has that need. And so as you raise that into your field of awareness, but then in those moments for the first few times, it's going to be a little uncomfortable fighting the urge.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to remember when you're starting a new thing or giving up a habit. There's this expectation that it shouldn't feel bad or it shouldn't feel that bad.
Yeah.
But I think we're here to say that, no, change kind of sucks on some level. It
can sometimes.
It really is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And in that moment where you're faced with the decision of like, do I go left or right? Do I do the thing or not do the thing? What's happening is you're basically kind of suppressing the part of whatever decision you go with.
Yeah.
It's a big choice because you're suppressing the part of you that wants to do the whatever it is. And so
you're taking it away.
Yeah. And that can feel uncomfortable because you're literally, man.
That part of you will have the inverse reaction because you're kind of wired to keep repeating the same behavior. Like, there's a reason you were doing it. And so when you take that away, there's going to be a reaction. This is why when we do parts work, we don't go into any parts when we don't go to deeper, kind of more sensitive places when there's other parts that are really scared or really angry. Because if you go there, you're just bypassing and not honoring how you feel.
Yeah.
And it's important to know that with any behavior or habit, whether it's rage, cigarettes, food, anything, that it's not even just an emotional attachment. If it's been a behavior for a long time, now it's a physical attachment. It's kind of a motor function attachment. It's it might be a soothing technique. Like whatever you're doing is some form of a coping strategy. And when you take that coping strategy out, there's going to be some kind of inverse reaction.
And I think that's why it's so hard to willpower your way through it.
Right.
Because if you're just trying to suppress this part of you every time and it's always feeling terrible, it's really hard to stick with that. At some point in the change process, it should feel more and more and more effortless, right? Like, think about it this way. Let's say that you are, if you're somebody who's never done a hard drug like meth or heroin, for you it's effortless not to do those things, and rightfully so. You've never been exposed to them. There's no chemical, addiction going on. But for somebody who has had an addiction to those chemicals, it's so much willpower and discipline for them to continue that. Now imagine if that person who is overcoming a heroin or meth addiction, imagine if 30 years later it was the same exact feeling as it was 5 days later. It'd be impossible to quit. Of course you can't sustain that much willpower forever. But luckily for all of us, with addiction, it gets easier as you go on. There's certain things that begin to change inside you. And it's not just a matter of gritting through it. When it comes to, addictions on that level, you got to involve all sorts of things like your community, your social circle. You got to go in and see why you were doing those things in the first place. You got to really do some soul searching. And it's not just about gritting your teeth and sticking with it. It's a lot of other things so that, like as you were saying, finding those needs that were being met by that behavior, by that substance.
Yeah, 100%. And it's important with people with addiction that work through it sustainably. They're not just willpowering their way through it. They're trying, typically, recoveries go into the emotional reasons of why you did it. And they also work with the physical withdrawals that you're going to have, as well as the kind of all the different collateral effects it might have to change the behavior, your community around you, your social circle, like you were saying, not running with the same group of people, and finding substitutes for the behavior. Mm-hmm. So if we really break it down, the change in the moment can feel uncomfortable, but the way to do it is to, number one, is prime your mind. So you have to understand it intellectually, emotionally, and physically why you're doing it, and you have to help all those different systems in your body to cope and to be on board with it, even though it's going to be difficult when you're in the moment. But if you understand intellectually while you're doing it, and you're helping that part of you emotionally that is struggling with and wants that need fulfilled by the avoidance or whatever the behavior is, then you really can help the physical part of you, because the physical urge may be there, so maybe you're tweaking a little bit for a cigarette or something, and you can say, I know, but we can't do this because XYZ, and we've got our values in alignment. And then as you reinforce the behavior, as you more and more do that kind of physical withdrawal or make that decision in the more intentional direction, it gets easier and easier, because you're carving out these new thought patterns, new neural pathways, and your brain is physically changing as you do that. That's why when you get momentum with stuff, it's so much easier to go. It's that start that makes it so difficult.
Yeah, it's that start. You at first don't resonate with the new behavior or the absence of it. You resonate with that behavior and you want to do it. But if you can just stick through that difficult first month, that difficult 2 months, on the other side of that is a lot of support from within. You can call it spiritual support even. There's this, as you keep moving in a certain direction, things start to align in your favor. I've seen this with people who don't like eating kale. At first, it's like, this is so nasty. I don't like the taste of this. I don't like the way it makes me feel even. Why would anyone eat this? And part of it's they're just not resonating with it yet. But once you eat it for a couple months, you realize like, oh, wow. Now when I eat this kale, I actually feel good afterwards. And if I go eat the sugary thing, I feel bad afterwards. So there's this immediate... The day I really quit cigarettes was I hadn't had any for a couple weeks or a couple months. I can't remember. But I didn't have any for a while. And then I had one. And it gave me a stomach ache. Yeah. And I was like, oh. Yeah. Dang, I can't even enjoy these anymore. Yeah, yeah. And that's when it really became possible. For me, it was like, it just helped so much. And it's the same thing with sugar. If I have sugar and I start to get that headache, that nausea feeling, and that's kind of where I'm at right now with sugar, is if I eat it, it's just this reminder of like why I've been avoiding it in the first place. Yeah. So you get that physical feedback, and that's what we're talking about, those three main components, and they will work synergistically, or you can kind of use any two to your advantage to help the third, or in any way like that. So I guess just to summarize, change is a long process. It can be a long process. It starts with awareness, becoming very aware of what you're doing and why you want to change that behavior. And at some point, it's challenging. It feels uncomfortable. And then the more you stick with it, the more you clarify your intentions, and you just keep sticking with it, there's this support that comes. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And eventually, it's easier not to do it than to do it. So... Yeah. And it's important to understand intellectually why you want to do it, to understand the emotional pieces and parts in the behavior and the interaction, and then ultimately understand and use physically what's going on in those moments. And you can use any two of those to help with the third, or vice versa. We recommend, always working with a coach or a therapist when you're exploring these things, because you might not have all the tools that you need to understand what's going on, and it's also amazing to have an outside person to be a soundboard and support you through it. So guys, just remember, no matter how long any of your behaviors have been going on, no matter how intense they are or how long you've been suffering, you're never ever stuck. You might just need some support. So please click the like and subscribe button. For Ennis, I'm Jim. We're Inner Solutions. Thank you guys so much. Remember, you're never stuck.